have come from. I have issued a challenge, and I've now reached the point where I think I have to shut up and put my money where my mouth is once I can start making some again. In relation to the issue of commercializing the characters of our Caribbean folk stories. Ladja Bless, Steel Donkey, Anansi. Why shouldn't our children be able to touch something that is tangible and it does the things that and expresses in a way that is characteristic of what or who that character represents in our children's stories? Why are our engineers not working with our artists, who are then not working with our financiers, who are then not working with extra-regional distributors to be able to produce these toys and games that are reflective of our Caribbean culture? In the area of media, more often than not, Anansi is used by extra-regional entities to teach children in the diaspora, but with no benefit coming back to us. In the same way that Ethan Allen markets a Barbados line of furniture, don't mind that furniture is unique to us because of our colonial history in this part of the world. And these are the hurdles in our minds that I want us to be able to overcome. The truth is, all of these things point back to attitudinal change and cultural change. One of the other major areas that points in that direction, and which also requires you to be able to put systems in place, is the need for measurement to enhance productivity. We hear the word, we hear the word, we hear the word to the point we don't know what it means after a while. Productivity, productivity, productivity. And we hear it every time we have a crisis. And yes, it relates to measurement. Yes, it relates to training. Yes, it relates to technical aspects in terms of processes that can enhance efficiency. But above all else, I want to suggest to you that productivity in our context, particularly across small businesses, is about culture and respect. It is about culture and respect. And I have given the example over and over of a man or a lady who works in a small hotel, small business. You ask her or him to move that pot from there to that corner. And I said, no, that's not part of my job responsibility. How many times have you heard it? That same person will go home at another manager who is building, for argument's sake, an extension to his garage. He will work 12 or 15 hours for the weekend, 3 weekends straight, bank holiday included. And when the fella asked him at the end of it, man, how much I got for you? He said, for me? Man, you insulted me, man. Where's we? You heard what I just told you? He's working harder by his friend or his family than he's working at the place at which he's employed. But he's doing so because his heart is there, because he believes that he is being respected and generally has a level of security in the relationship with the person for whom he's working. So that when I say to you that we have some cultural issues to confront, cultural issues that affect how we treat one another, cultural issues that emanate from our history in terms of our confidence levels. Too many of our established enterprises, large and small, because there are established small business enterprises that are successful and have been around for decades, who are not prepared to go outside the temple of their familiar, who are not prepared to go outside what they're comfortable with. And much of that relates to our cultural makeup and our confidence levels as a people. And we have to address it frontally. It is not going to be removed overnight. It's not going to be resolved by any one policy or not. But we have to do things both within the public and private sector, within the churches and within our homes, within our schools, within our playing fields, and auditoriums in our culture that reinforce our sense of confidence in who we are, such that we can redefine what our future is, and we can equally redefine how we relate to one another, particularly those who are not necessarily on the same level, but who work for us and whose respect is equally necessary in order for us to get the best out of them in the productive enterprise within which we are engaged. And you know, I make this one other example. The quickest thing you can do to offend a Bajan is to walk in and don't say good morning or good night or hello. Wait, he come in here and play, he ain't talking to nobody. How many times have you heard that? Or he passed through here and cut his eye at me. How many times have you heard that? Now, in many instances, the person may well not even be cognizant that they are offending somebody, and their mind may just be going a million miles a minute. But the impact of that on other people is such because of the lack of self-esteem and confidence that we have as a people. And if you ask me what is the major challenge for the next 15, 20 years for us as a people and as a nation, it is to root our people culturally, psychologically, and financially. And it is a twin challenge, because that cultural rooting and that financial rooting gives us choices and options that we do not currently have. So you need, and we need, to open up our minds to change our business model, to change our approach, and to admit of possibilities that have only hitherto been the subject of discussion, partial preparation and studies, but not sustained execution. And that is why when I addressed the Chamber of Commerce, I had a twin theme, not only of daring to dream, but determined to do. That is why when I describe the problems in this economy, I don't stop at having a government that we can't afford in terms of costs, and I mean costs, or productive sectors that are not earning for us in terms of foreign exchange, but I go to the next level of what I call an implementation deficit disorder. That is not peculiar to the public sector, I fear, but that is perhaps representative of the culture of contentment that has become synonymous with living in Barbados. And what we are going through is a wake-up call. Now, we can choose to enjoy the camaraderie associated with these kinds of speeches or read a report, but as Mahatma Gandhi said, you are the change. And your future depends on it, and our future depends on it. And until we recognize that it is within us that that first step must come, we are going to continue to be having these discussions over and over. Those who believe that government must be all things to all people, you're living in the wrong time and the wrong world. Those who believe that government doesn't exist at all, you are living in the wrong time and the wrong world. There's a role for each. But you cannot have progress. A government does not earn foreign exchange. A government generally is not involved in the earning of profits. Ordinary citizens and enterprises are. And therefore, a government will only be as good as its citizens are prepared to accept the vision and act upon the vision, not just rely on government to be able to function and fill a vacuum, because it can't. And given that nature abhors a vacuum, and given that we now have a CARICOM single market and economy, enterprises will find their way very easily to fill that vacuum. And as it relates to the Small Business Association and your role for advocacy, I think that you can be justifiably proud in much of what has been done. But there's a need for a continuous voice on a number of key areas that I will address very briefly. One of them is to be able to work with the IDC to be able to put a framework in place to better protect intellectual property rights that exist. I can't be speaking to you about innovation and commercializing creativity and not having a supporting framework that allows you to benefit from intellectual property rights across the board. And intellectual property rights is not only for the likes of Edwin and Alison, but they're for the likes of those of you who create things or design things that can be the subject of patents and trademarks, things that are not necessarily top of the mind for a lot of our population, but the educational process and the supporting process, because unfortunately legal fees can be a little high sometimes. But the educational process that is necessary and the pooling process that allows more of our small and really what I call nano enterprises to be able to benefit and to put themselves in a position to exploit their intellectual property rights as a source of revenue. And the beauty about intellectual property rights is that in many instances, the revenue stream goes on beyond the life of the enterprise or the individual, sometimes by 20 years, sometimes in music as long as 50 years, as Bob Marley's estate has learned to their credit. Similarly, the value of research and development. Many of you as small entrepreneurs may want to be able to engage in aspects of research and development, but simply don't have the pockets to be able to do so. And if within a sector, alliances can be made with the University of the West Indies if they have the particular expertise, or other entities outside of our shores, given the ease of movement of information and persons in the world in which we live today. And I believe that the SBA is a perfect vehicle to make those kinds of alliances, simply because if you call up your correspondent entity in another country, you are more likely to get the list of available support companies than if a small entrepreneur tries to do it on their own. Nobody's likely to take them on in the same way. Similarly, use of ICT and websites. And I know that the SBA is already going down that line. But let's ask ourselves a question, both in government and in the private sector. Most of Barbados uses information and communications technology for email communication, for storing records, call some games. But how many use it to effectively market and provide online sales? And a large part of the problem, I know you will tell me, is the absence of the e-commerce regulatory framework, as well as the eagerness of the commercial banks to be able to operate and to have a user-friendly environment that allows for the sale of product digitally. It is happening more. You are now seeing elements of mobile banking, you're seeing elements of internet banking, but the truth is that the level of acceptance among small entrepreneurs of this mechanism as a primary mechanism for sale of services in particular, and in some instances goods, is absolutely critical if you are going to leapfrog over other competitors in other jurisdictions. The internet removes the handicap of geography and size. And those hitherto have been two of our major handicaps as a country. We need to be able to make it work for us. Similarly, in government, the use of technology has not been used to reform processes. There should be no reason why an accident report should still take 6 to 9 months to get, if you're going to have the same rules govern the creation and production of an accident report that governed it hitherto technology existed. And technology more often than not means a redefinition of your processes if you are to get the best value out of the utilization of that technology, rather than using it as a communications tool and a word tool and a records keeping tool at minimum.